Hello, and welcome to another episode of Amputee Outdoors. I'm your host, Glenn, and today we're going to do something a little different from my usual hiking videos. Instead of hiking up in the Cascade Mountains like I normally do, I'm going to hike from Factoria, a suburb of Seattle, along trail, the I-90 trail that goes along I-90, across Mercer Island, across the Lake Washington Bridge, and into Seattle, and back again. Now, depending on how I'm feeling, this is anything from a 16-mile round trip to 20-mile round trip. We'll just see how we go. But anyway, we're going to start here, cross over, and begin the journey alongside I-90. Come on with me.
The Mountains to Sound Greenway Trail, also known as the I-90 Trail, will eventually connect Seattle, Mercer Island, Bellevue, Issaquah, Preston, and Snoqualmie for pedestrians and cyclists. This fully paved trail, separate from motor vehicles, currently stretches from Seattle across Mercer Island to the Factoria area of Bellevue, which is where I started this journey. The trail runs parallel to Interstate 90. Not many people know this, but the I-90 freeway is designated as the American Veterans Memorial Highway. It incorporates two of the longest floating bridges in the world, the Lacey V. Murrow Memorial Bridge and the Homer M. Hadley Memorial Bridge, which cross Lake Washington from Seattle to Mercer Island. The Homer M. Hadley Memorial Bridge is the one we'll be walking across today. The section of Interstate 90 between Seattle and Intrastate 405 in Bellevue was delayed for decades because of environmental concerns and lawsuits by local groups over the freeway's potential impact on nearby neighborhoods. A compromise agreement was reached by federal, state, and local governments in 1976 to build a second floating bridge across Lake Washington and include extensive parks above tunneled sections of I-90, which were completed in the early 1990s. The new floating bridge opened in 1989 and carried bidirectional traffic, while the original floating bridge was renovated. Unfortunately, the old bridge's center pontoons sank during a November 1990 windstorm due to a contractor error and were rebuilt over the following 3 years, reopening to traffic on September 12, 1993, marking the completion of the Transcontinental Highway. More on that disaster a little bit later in the video. This is the westbound section of I-90 I'm walking under. Several thousand tons of metal, steel, and cars rushing above me. It's a little intimidating. We take for granted these massive structures that we drive along daily, never thinking about the engineering that went into it, the technology that went into it, the sheer hard work that went into creating these masterpieces of engineering. And this is the eastbound section of I-90 suspended above me on pillars that look worryingly thin. This beautifully curved off-ramp is the last off-ramp to Bellevue before we get to Mercer Island. Here we're crossing the East Channel Bridge, which travels over a smaller arm of Lake Washington. Most people just call it the Mercer Island Bridge. When the state began its first plan for I-90 in 1963, the interstate highway system was changing the face of the nation, wiping out old towns, spawning tacky strips of commerce, and breeding more and more cars and trucks to roar past homes, lower property values, and clog city streets. The first design for the Seattle area stretch of I-90 was no exception. "It's going to bury Mercer Island under pillars of concrete," proclaimed a member of the city's planning commission. The island looked to be the logical spot for stopping a freeway. You can drive from I-90 from Boston to Seattle, and nowhere will you see the interstate bisecting an upscale residential community remotely resembling Mercer Island. Mercer Island's residents knew they needed a new road for getting on and off the island, but they preferred to not see it, smell it, or hear it, in the words of former Mayor Aubrey Davis. In late 1970, Davis persuaded State Highway Director George Andrews to put together a team including engineers, architects, and experts in fields such as acoustics, air pollution, ecology, and economics to redesign the original plans. The result? A narrower roadway covered with lids and platforms and surrounded by parklands with pedestrian and bicycle trails. As you walk the I-90 trail through Mercer Island, you realize just how much work went into accomplishing this goal of making it something you couldn't see, hear, or smell. I think Aubrey Davis would have been quite honored to know that they named a park after him. These large pillars are the vent tubes for the tunnel below that I-90 goes through as it crosses part of Mercer Island. When they work, a floating bridge is an engineering marvel. They're made up of narrow, barge-like hollow concrete boxes called pontoons. The pontoons are bolted together and then tethered with heavy cables to giant concrete anchors on the lake bottom. The cables help to stabilize the bridge. In November 1990, the Lacey V. Murrow Bridge was 50 years old and was being refurbished. A new matching span that I'm walking across here had been built alongside and was already carrying cars across the lake, so the old bridge was closed to traffic for the renovation project. Engineers had removed the pontoon's watertight doors so they could work on the old bridge, but when a storm arrived on November 25, 1990, the wind-driven water from the lake flooded the pontoons, causing the bridge to sink. The Lacey V. Murrow Bridge was no more. Nobody was hurt that blustery November day, but when the old bridge sank, it severed anchor cables on the new bridge. Highway engineers faced a dire situation. The Murrow Bridge was at the bottom of Lake Washington, and the anchor cables on the new bridge were broken, making them unsafe. Because of that, traffic was stopped for a few days while the cables were replaced. The cost of this disaster added another $69 million to the project. While the planners were working to appease Mercer Islanders, they still had a problem to the west, where leaders in Seattle's central area rumbled about a white highway through black bedrooms. Those leaders asserted that their neighborhood, with its large African American population, would bear much of the burden of the new freeway, while reaping no benefits at all. John Stephenson, the first I-90 project director, remembers the community meetings on the project as extraordinarily contentious and says there were a number of occasions when I began to wonder what my next assignment would be, as this one seemed to be ending. The A story in the Seattle Times in 1971 said, I-90 may be scrapped. Continued bickering and delays could mean it will cost the state millions of extra dollars and hold up completion until as late as 1980, which in hindsight was optimistic. The state negotiated with Central Area representatives to build a 2,000-foot lid over the freeway west of Mount Baker Ridge, as well as a new park and an elementary school. With that, all parties were finally satisfied and construction continued on. Along the trail, you'll find the occasional works of art, like this stunning gazebo built by the wonderful people of Seattle's sister city in South Korea, Daejeon. The vibrant colors, intricate design, and construction speaks volumes about the craftsmanship, skill, artistry, and love of beauty the builders have. You'll also find things like this, which made me think, what a piece of art. Seattle was now just one bridge away, and there it is with Interstate 5 running straight down through the middle of it. As I approached downtown Seattle, I could see and hear the commotion indicative of large cities, and something I prefer to avoid. So I turned around at this point and started the trek back. The cost of the last 7 miles of I-90 exploded from an $80 million estimate in 1966 to $1.56 billion in 1993, more than $200 million per mile. And this section of the interstate will likely remain one of a kind. Other communities with busy freeways may long for I-90 style amenities such as the lids and berms and buffers and parklands, but such things are simply not available under today's funding restraints. You could say of I-90 that they simply don't build them like that anymore. And the story of I-90 isn't over yet. Depending upon which report you read, light rail will run across this floating bridge either in 2024 or 2025. But given its history, that's probably optimistic. No train tracks in the world have gone across a floating bridge. This is because train tracks require a stable, non-moving foundation. The rail has to mimic the movement of Lake Washington, calling for the installation of 8 innovative track bridges. The track bridges are specially engineered to compensate for 6 ranges of lake motion to enable trains to safely travel from the fixed sections of the bridge to the floating section. Once completed, this will be a pinnacle of engineering accomplishment. When the sun came out, it reminded me of the fact that people in Seattle buy the most sunglasses per capita than any other city in the USA. Why? Well, with over 200 cloudy days a year, it's common for Seattleites to either forget where they've left their sunglasses after not wearing them for a long period of time, or leave the house without a pair of sunglasses thinking they won't need them. After passing under Interstate 405 high above me, my trek starting point came into view.
Well, back to where it all started this morning. 19 miles, and yeah, my stump is kind of aching a little bit, but it's been worth it. Started out kind of a gray overcast day, but it's become beautiful. I hope this has inspired you to get out there and explore your world, your neighborhood. Get out there, enjoy it. Go for a walk. Even if it's just a short walk, go for a walk. If you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and as always, my friends, see you out there.